I never thought one happy day could change my whole life. I smiled because everyone else was smiling. Inside, I felt something strange that I could not explain. That was the day my parents told me a big secret. I was 8 years old and I loved my life. My parents always had time for me after school. We ate dinner together every evening and talked about our day. I believed nothing would ever change. My father helped me with my homework every night. My mother listened to every story I wanted to tell. They came to all my school events with happy smiles. I felt like the luckiest child in the world. One evening, I came home from school and saw both of my parents waiting in the kitchen. They looked excited and held each other's hands. I thought they had a surprise for me. I was right, but it was not the surprise I expected. "Come here, sweetheart," my father said with a warm smile. I walked to him and sat beside him at the table. My mother gently took my hand in hers. She looked happier than I had ever seen her. "We have wonderful news," my mother said softly. She placed my hand on her stomach and smiled. "You are going to have a little sister or brother." Both of them looked at me, waiting for my answer. I smiled because I thought that was the right thing to do. I said, "That's great," in a cheerful voice. My parents hugged me tightly and laughed together. They believed I was as happy as they were. That night, I could not sleep for a long time. I looked at the ceiling and thought about the baby. I asked myself many questions that nobody could answer. Would my parents still have time for me? The next morning, everything felt normal again. I went to school and played with my friends during lunch. I decided not to think about the baby anymore. I believed my fears would disappear soon. After school, my best friend Emma noticed that I looked quiet. She asked me if something was wrong. I told her that my mother was going to have a baby. Emma smiled and said, "That is wonderful news. You will have someone to play with," Emma said happily. I smiled, but my heart still felt heavy. I wanted to believe her words. Deep inside, I was not sure she was right. As the weeks passed, our house slowly started to change. My parents bought tiny baby clothes and small toys. They painted the guest room with soft yellow paint. Every day there was something new for the baby. One Saturday, my father asked me to help build a baby bed. I happily brought him the tools and held the wooden pieces. We laughed together while we worked. For a moment, I forgot all my worries. When we finished, my father looked at the bed proudly. "The baby will sleep here," he said with a big smile. I smiled too, but I suddenly noticed something. My old toy box was gone. "Where are my toys?" I asked quietly. My father looked surprised for a second. "We moved them to the garage," he answered kindly. "We need more space now." I nodded and said nothing else. Those toys were part of my childhood. Nobody asked me before moving them away. It was only a small thing, but it hurt. My mother spent more time reading baby books every evening. She talked with my grandmother about diapers, bottles, and baby names. I wanted to tell her about my school project. She smiled and said, "Just 1 minute." I waited on the sofa with my notebook in my hands. 1 minute became 10 minutes. Then 20 minutes passed. Finally, my mother looked tired and said, "Can you show me tomorrow?" "Of course," I answered with a small smile. I went back to my room quietly. I closed the notebook without opening it. My project suddenly did not feel important anymore. A few days later, my teacher gave me a special certificate. My drawing was the best in the whole class. I felt proud as I ran home after school. I could not wait to show my parents. I opened the front door and called for my mother. She was sitting on the sofa and looked very tired. Before I could say anything, she held her stomach and closed her eyes. My father quickly helped her stand up. "We have to go to the doctor," he said. They hurried out of the house without seeing my certificate. I stood alone in the hallway holding the paper. I looked at the colorful stars on the certificate. Just an hour earlier, it had felt very special. Now it was only a piece of paper in my hands. I slowly placed it on the kitchen table. That evening, my grandmother stayed with me. She made my favorite soup and tried to make me smile. We watched a funny movie together. I laughed, but my thoughts stayed with my parents. Late that night, the phone rang. My grandmother answered it with a bright smile. She looked at me and said, "You have a little sister." My heart started beating very fast. The next morning, we went to the hospital. Many family members were already there with flowers and gifts. Everyone stood around the baby and smiled. I quietly waited near the door. My mother finally saw me and waved her hand. "Come here," she said softly. She placed the tiny baby into my arms very carefully. My little sister opened her eyes for just a second. Her tiny hand held one of my fingers. She looked so small and peaceful. I smiled at her without thinking. In that moment, I believed everything would be okay. I did not know that my life was about to change forever. I did not know how lonely I would sometimes feel. I also did not know that my little sister was not the real problem. The hardest days were still waiting for me. The first weeks at home were very busy. My little sister cried many times during the day and night. My parents looked tired all the time. Our house no longer felt quiet. At first, I tried to help in every way I could. I brought diapers to my mother. I carried small bottles to my father. Every time they thanked me, I felt happy. One evening, I waited with my favorite storybook. My father always read one chapter before I went to bed. That night, he looked at the baby and then at me. "I'm sorry," he said. "Can we read tomorrow?" I smiled and said, "That's okay." I walked to my room with the book in my hands. I placed it on my desk without opening it. Tomorrow never came. Days became weeks, and weeks became months. My parents loved me, but they were always busy. Sometimes I wanted to tell them about school. Then the baby started crying, and the moment was gone. One afternoon, I came home with another good grade. I wanted to share the news during dinner. Before I could speak, my little sister dropped her spoon and started crying loudly. Everyone looked at her, and nobody heard my words. I quietly finished my dinner. My report card stayed inside my school bag. That night, I looked at it alone in my room. It did not feel as special anymore. At school, my teacher noticed that I was quieter than before. She asked me if everything was all right. I wanted to tell her the truth. Instead, I smiled and said, "I'm just tired." My best friend Emma also saw the change. One day she asked, "Do you still like being a big sister?" I looked at the ground before answering. "I don't know," I whispered. Emma sat beside me on the playground. She did not laugh or give advice. She only listened while I talked. Sometimes that was exactly what I needed. One Saturday, I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. They did not know I was standing near the door. My mother sounded worried. "I'm afraid we don't spend enough time with her," she said quietly. My father sighed and nodded. "I know," he answered. "I miss our evenings together." I stood very still. For the first time in many months, I realized something important. My parents had noticed my sadness. They were not forgetting me on purpose. The next evening, my father knocked on my bedroom door. He sat beside me on the bed with my old storybook in his hands. "Can we start reading again?" he asked with a gentle smile. I looked at him for a second. Part of me wanted to say no because I had waited for so long. Then I remembered how much I had missed these moments. I smiled and moved closer to him. We read only one chapter that night. It was not a long time. Still, it felt like finding a small piece of my old life again. My heart felt lighter than it had in months. A few days later, my mother asked me to go for a walk with her. My father stayed home with the baby. We walked slowly through the park without saying much at first. Finally, my mother stopped near a bench. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I know things have been hard for you." I looked at her with surprise. Tears filled my eyes before I could answer. I had waited so long to hear those words. "I thought you loved the baby more than me," I said quietly. My voice was shaking. It was the first time I had spoken those words out loud. My mother hugged me tightly. "My love didn't become smaller," she whispered. "My heart simply became bigger." We both cried for a few minutes. Then we laughed because we looked so funny with our red eyes. It was the happiest walk I had taken in a very long time. When we came home, my little sister was sleeping peacefully. I stood beside her small bed and watched her tiny face. She had never tried to take my place. She only wanted to be loved, just like I did. As she grew older, we became very close. We played games together after school. We shared secrets before bedtime. Slowly, she became my best friend. Years later, I told my sister how lonely I had once felt. She looked surprised and held my hand. "I always wanted to be like you," she said with a smile. Her words stayed in my heart. I spent so many years thinking that I had lost something. I never noticed that I had also gained someone very special. Now, when I look at our old family photos, I no longer count how many pictures show me or my sister. I only see a family that was learning how to grow together. We were not perfect, but we never stopped loving one another. Sometimes love changes its shape. It may not look the same as before, but that does not mean it becomes smaller. True love is not about having all the attention. It is about knowing that even when life changes, there is still a place for you in someone's heart.